Top of the morning to you laddies, it's your boy Jacksepticeye, coming at you on Friday the 27th of September, what are we in? Yeah, September, and I haven't been around all week. I've been arsing about because that card last weekend was so uninspiring. I've been twiddling my thumbs, writing a little bit, spending too much time trolling people, to be honest. So if you see me sending out trolly tweets on Facebook or Reddit or whatever, just say, Jack, maybe back to work, but yeah, no, still got my work done for the week. We're just a little bit behind on the podcasting. However, there is a lot of stuff going on this weekend, so that's good fun. And also, while we were gone, some interesting stuff happened outside the cage. We got some news, we got plenty of previews. We're going to talk ADCC because someone asked a question about that, and I fucking love ADCC. So let's get into it. News-wise, the UFC have finally cut BJ Penn. This comes courtesy of your boy, the man with the inside track to UFC news, Kevin Iole, straight from the Ioliverse. Not really a true Ioliverse take. A true Ioliverse take would be, careful, he's going to become Bellator's biggest star. If you haven't been keeping up with the BJ Penn stuff, which I'm sure you have, because certainly I've been hearing more about his bollocks outside the ring in the last few months than I've been hearing about actual good fighters in the ring. He got in a fight in Hilo and that was filmed, and then he got his missus came out and said that basically the entire time that he was fighting, at his prime, he was coked out of his mind and just very abusive. And then he got filmed in another street altercation, and that one wasn't too bad because he was just holding the guy down in like back mount, face down on the pavement, and he could have been murdering the guy. And at that point, I was feeling like, fair enough, I expect a lot of these guys, especially your BJ Penn, like the most famous man in Hawaii for fighting. I bet a lot of drunk dickheads come up to you and try and start fights when you're out. And fair play for not just murdering them. Actually, we'll be getting on to Jeremy Stevens later, but then he was in another one and footage came out of that. And then the same day, more footage came out of that where he got knocked out by a left hook. And then they were like not fighting at the time, I think it was. It was like, it's done. And then the guy was like left hook and BJ just goes stiff and falls on the pavement. It was pretty bad, but you get the sense that the UFC wouldn't cut him if he'd won that fight, which is kind of the sad part. They'd just be like, boys will be boys, but because he got stiffed by some nobody, that's not great. People were saying, like, saddest thing I've ever seen, but you haven't seen Don Fry get into a fight with someone's bodyguard backstage at Pride and get sparked. That was bad. So yeah, BJ's gone. This is the thing, will Bellator or One pick him up? Is it worth it? I mean, is he going to feel motivated to? Because his whole thing was like, I'm just a couple of wins from being the best in the world again, and I'll prove it. And at this point, you can't really say that. You know that you're not going to be the best. And if you start losing in Bellator and One, it looks really bad. Kind of sad given what he used to be. Because it wasn't just freakish athleticism and talent. He was a very technically skilled fighter. As a boxer, he was one of the few to like actually incorporate the jab and head movement back in that time. And, as a guard passer, as a top player, lots of technical developments in this game. We have BJ Penn to thank for them. But anyway, that seems to be the end of his UFC saga. I hope. What else is going on? Oh, Eddie Alvarez is out at the One Lightweight Grand Prix due to injury. Bit of a shame because it's all a bit weird because he lost in the first round, got brought back in because someone got injured because it's a Grand Prix, got dropped by Edward Fuliang, swept him with a fucking lasso sweep with no gi, awesome, and finished him. And we were like, oh my god, Eddie's back, and then now he's out at the final, which is kind of sad. But this Grand Prix has just been a train wreck, basically. And I'm not going to say that like one's fucked up or something, because I'd say 60% of tournaments are train wrecks, Grand Prix. Even the ones that I remember favourably, like Dream 2008 Lightweight Grand Prix, which I absolutely loved. The guy who won it was a reserve. So it's not. A lot of these things just don't go off as planned, and that's part of the magic of the tournament. The downside is that they put Christian Lee in Eddie Alvarez's place. The whole thing was to get eyes on their lightweight division, and everyone would appreciate that. They got the belt on Christian Lee since Eddie Alvarez came to the division and drew eyes to it, and all the reactions to this online were, who's Christian Lee? Which was just hilarious. And it's doubly hilarious because the other lad, Daggy, I can't remember his full name, if he wins this fight against Christian Lee, he doesn't get the belt, he gets the Grand Prix belt, and he wins a shot at Christian Lee's title. So basically we're back to Andy Ruiz versus Anthony Joshua or any boxing match now, if you beat the favourite, you weren't supposed to beat the favourite, so you actually have to beat them twice. My one thing to say that I'm going to say, look out for Olivia Cost, because if Olivia Cost is reffing that fight, you'll know something's not right. Because Christian Lee and Angela Lee regularly fight in rings and cages with Olivia Costa as the ref, and he ignores them, literally using the fence to turn over position. What else is going on? Oh, fucking... Let's talk about the spate of eye injuries. Week before, Justin Gaethje said he'd had an eye infection in camp, and that wasn't great. And we were like, uh-oh, Justin Gaethje's eyes aren't great anyway. And I think he had laser surgery, which is supposed to, like, thin your corneas, because they tell you not to do combat sports or even contact sports after it. But he said that he had an eye infection, and we all had a good laugh, being like, someone probably farted on his pillow. But now it's become like a big thing, not just eye infections, but Keenan Cornelius is out of ADCC, having just won the Pan Ams like the other week. He's been training at Danaher's because he got kicked out of Atos. Like, it's a weird situation because he was with Atos for a long time, but he was sort of doing his own thing. And everyone at Atos is like, we love him, but also we've kicked him out. And you go, I think there's something not being said here. But he's still doing a podcast with Josh Hinger, whatever that is. And they're still really good friends, so I don't know what's going on there, but the whole thing was like, what will Keenan do? Because he's like the best pure jiu-jitsu player, well, one of that America's ever produced. Certainly one of the most creative and at the forefront of innovations in the gi, and no gi, to be fair. But he's always had more success no gi, which is ironic because he loves the gi. But so he fell in with the Danaher Death Squad, who he's always like trained with on and off. Yeah, he's friends with Gordon Ryan and Nicky Ryan and people like that. But he's been at Renzo's training with them for like 2 weeks, and he's already got this viral conjunctivitis or whatever it is that's taken him off. Oh, it might have been bacterial, can't remember. But it's taken him off the mats. And apparently, like, there's a spate of it going around at Renzo's right now. I think Oliver Taza had it. And, as soon as this happens, people are like, well, what's the mat cleaning procedure at Renzo's? And they're like, oh, well, actually, they don't clean it between classes. And you're like, that's fucking rough. Because if you don't know where Renzo's is, it's in a basement for a start. Apparently they just have so many classes on that they don't have time to, like, scrub down the mats between classes. And you're like, oh, that's not good. That's not great. Basically means that, like, some filthy knacker from somewhere else who's just visiting New York and wants to take in a class at Renzo's can go down there, and then 2 hours later Keenan Cornelius is on the mats and getting their viral conjunctivitis or whatever it is, or ringworm or whatever. But that brings us on to the other eye injuries, which are actually injuries. Stipe Miocic is out for the rest of the year with an eye injury, which is not great if you're Daniel Cormier, because people are already accusing you of being a serial eye poker. And then DC also said that he wants only one more fight with the UFC, and the UFC have basically said we're going to finish the trilogy with Stipe. So basically, DC's left waiting for Miocic, and Miocic is left waiting to know that he's going to get his eye fixed and then come back and get it poked again. And then the one at the weekend was Yair Rodriguez versus Jeremy Stevens. 15 seconds, 2 kicks land. I read the headline before I watched the fight, and I expected like proper finger deep in the eye, Rumble Johnson versus whoever that lad was, where you could basically, like, the top joint of his finger disappeared into Rumble's eye. But no, just like a little glancing thing, but corneal abrasion, scraped the cornea, and Stevens is out for 180 days on medical suspension. So they've rebooked it for October 18th as the co-main this time, which I'm so glad, because I saw that and I was like, they've made that the main event. I'm going to be fucking furious, because you can't use that twice to sell cards, especially as the card at the weekend was shit. The whole thing was everyone was looking at that card going, this is shit. Well, at least Yair versus Stevens is happening. And then when that blew up and everyone was throwing shit at the cage, I was like, don't buy tickets to the shit event when it's liable to change and it only takes one fight to make it completely shit, and then throw stuff at the cage. But anyway, there's more moving and shaking in the featherweight division, which we like. Brian Ortega is going to be booked against Korean Zombie. Brian Ortega hasn't fought since the loss to Max Holloway. And when I say loss, I mean complete ass whooping. Not put on a brave face, was very courageous in that fight, because he just got brutally beaten. Took about 400 strikes, and he wasn't like, I quit. It was I think it was Henna in his corner being like, there's no point, let's just no. Come back another day. Clearly, you're not going to work this guy out in the round we've got left, which I really respected. But he's been booked against Korean Zombie. Korean Zombie coming off that loss to Yair, where he basically was beating Yair, but then in the last 5 seconds of the fight. He heard the clapper go at 10 seconds and was like, right, now let's get retarded. And just lunged in and took the spinning back elbow, or the over the back elbow, that Yair had been trying up to that point and not really succeeded with. And gave Yair like the biggest knockout in UFC history. Just because he was, this has been the story of Korean Zombie's career. He was like, everyone, look how well I can take punches. And then, who sparked him? Was it Roop? I think Roop sparked him. And then he was like, okay, better actually be a little bit more technical. Surprised everyone with how technical he became on the feet. He sparked people like Mark Hominick. He hits hard, and he's also he's got weird swings, but he's also really sharpened up when he chooses to throw them. He doesn't just sort of swing wide with his chin up in the air anymore as much. And then just like the last 10 seconds of that fight, he was like, here comes the old Korean Zombie. Gets himself sparked. But Ortega versus Korean Zombie is an amazing fight because you'd expect Zombie to have the edge in the wrestling. And he's very good at reversing takedowns, like the rice bale style through, roll over onto top position, whereas Ortega isn't very good at takedowns, and they both have good fun striking. So can't say enough good things about that fight. It's happening in Busan in December 21st. So that might be like second last card of the year. And then Max Holloway has been booked to defend his featherweight title again against Alex Volkanovski, who I've been hot on for quite a while. I'm very interested to see what Volkanovski does, because Volkanovski has the footwork. Well, he's generally got pretty good footwork. And a lot of what he's been doing has been pushing guys against the fence and then hitting them on the break, or just taking them down and hitting them as they bounce up. But against Aldo, he was almost purely striking for most of it, until the third round where he just held him against the fence for a bit, and that was why people were so mad about that result. But yeah, I can't help but feel that's just sort of snuck up on us. Not a lot of... Well, maybe there'll be more fanfare before we get there, but just feels like they were so hot on Zabit, and there was a lot going on there, and now it's just sort of like, here's that Volkanovski fight. You're going, what? This is a division full of killers. Renato Moicano died for this. Why are you not putting more emphasis on it? I don't know. What do I know about promoting fights? Anyway, let's move on. Is that everything? Yeah, that's all our news. Let's talk about some of these fights coming up at the weekend. Oh, I'll talk about the fights from last weekend just quickly. There was only one that really bothered me. Irene Aldana, is it Irene? Irene Aldana, she was good. I enjoyed that. And the fight between Alexa Grasso and Carla Esparza was good too. I thought Carla Esparza is looking like she's getting better. And I thought the Grasso, she didn't lose to the degree that I'd be like, well, clearly it was just a one-off when she beat Karolina Kowalkiewicz. I think keep working at it, because she looked really good on the feet, as she always does. Her footwork looked better. She wasn't on the fence as much as she has been in the early going. And she's throwing up arm bars and stuff from the bottom, and actually threatening a very good top player, a very good lay-in player, if we're honest, in Carla Esparza, when she wants to be. So yeah, the women stole the show for me. Wasn't much of a show to steal, but they did steal the show. Anyway, let's talk about some of these fights coming up this weekend. I think we'll start with the bigger ones, and then we'll talk backwards to the Friday Bellator, because the one I'm really excited for, and the one I wrote a piece for at Unibet, you can check that out. Go to the Fight Primer and click through, or go to my Unibet profile or whatever. Is Hermansson versus Cannonier. There's some other fun stuff on that card, but it's our first trip to Danish. I'm hungry. Sorry, it's our first trip to Denmark. We're off to Copenhagen, and I'll be honest, Copenhagen's getting a pretty good card. Not all intentionally, because you had the Gunnar Nelson versus Thiago Alves fight, and you're going, really? And then Thiago Alves gets injured, and Gilbert Burns goes, what if I stepped in? And everyone went, yes, please. That sounds like an awesome fight. Let's have some of that, please. So good on Gilbert Burns for saving that fight, and making it far better than the original booking. Maybe not great for Gunnar Nelson, but we'll see. So we got some good stuff on this card. What we got going on? Lando Vanatter versus Mark Jaco on the prelims, are they Fight Pass prelims anymore? I forget, but, the very earliest stuff, you got Mark Jaco versus Lando Vanatter. Like that, Jaco, awkward counter-striker, really likes his spinning shit and his big overhands. Lando Vanatter, curious chappy, less of a counter-striker and more of a forward-moving striker, but not like mad pressure or anything. He sort of floats in on that lead leg side kick to the knee. And you're going to see this in this fight, I'm sure. Mark Jaco tries to kneecap people with it. Lando Vanatter just tries to put it on their leg, like he's just trying to place it there. And it really annoys guys, but it doesn't have that same effect of making them back away. It makes them go, I'm just going to, put weight on this leg, and then I'm going to run in and try and punch him afterwards. So against, was it Tamer? He was able to just keep stopping him with that little kick in the leg. Not even kick, just stepping on his knee. and then Tamer would rush in and Vanatter would drop back and counterpunch him. And that fight with John McDacey, which we always reference, where he just puts the sidekick on the knee, and it's just enough to annoy McDacey, because then he starts circling off. He doesn't just run away, he just starts slowly circling off, and Vanatter follows with the wheel kick and knocks him out. That won't work if you're like stamping on the guy's knee, and he sees you trying to stamp on his knee. He'll step way back. You won't come anywhere close with the wheel kick, as Yair Rodriguez so often doesn't. The other thing that Vanatter does, which messed up Tony Ferguson, is he'll throw the right hand lead, and then he'll weave out to his right, and then come up with another right hand. Just constantly like weaving his way inwards. Can make you susceptible to like uppercuts and knees, or people snapping you down, or catching you on the back of the head, as Tony Ferguson did several times in that fight and finished the fight by doing. But it does make it very hard for people to punch back at you. You're not like reacting to their response, but you are just throwing something out and moving your head. And if you throw and then move, it makes it very difficult for people to just throw back at you. So that's a good one, Jaco versus Vanatter. One of Vanatter's big weaknesses generally has been the clinch. He sort of chills there, and he like even out in the open, he'll grab an underhook or whatever, and he does it a lot because he weaves in. But then he'll give them space. So like Tamer and Jaco Close were both able to post their head, get their hips back, and knee him into oblivion. If you put Vanatter, well, I mean, obviously different weight classes, but Vanatter versus like Leon Edwards, I mean, I'd expect Leon Edwards' first fatality in the cage, to be honest, because it's just like that's the thing that Lando Vanatter really struggles with, or one of the things that he really struggles with. Vanatter's not really won a lot of fights in the UFC. What's he on now? Hold on. He's had 7 fights. He's won 3 of them. He's had 2 draws, 3 losses. Does that add up? Whatever. It's a very checkered record in the UFC, but the UFC have realized that he's a valuable dude to keep about. He's really useful. The last guy they put him in against, Marcus Mariano, was just a scrub. He was 6-4 at the time, and I remember watching that going, who is this guy, and why is Lando Vanatter fighting him? But, he's valuable to the UFC, not because he's a world beater, but because he's bloody interesting, and people, well, I do, but I know other people do. They see Lando Vanatter on the card, and they don't even care who's fighting. They go, that'll be fun. And this is what we're always criticising them for, cutting people like Darren Cruikshank, who are fun. What else we got going on? Lena Landsberg's back fighting Macy Chiasson. Haven't seen any Chiasson. She's 5-0. Oh no, I must have done. She's fought on like 4 UFC cards. Okay, well, I've seen her. And Lena Landsberg, Queen of the Elbows, Queen of the Knees. She was battering Aspen Ladd with knees along the fence. Really good stuff. I'm just throwing that out there. No predictions for that fight. No idea what's going to go on. Giga Chikadze is in, which is weird, because years ago, it might have been like 2 years ago, they said the UFC is going to sign him, and people were like, he's got 1 MMA fight. What the fuck is this? This was before they signed Gokhan Saki, to be fair. But he's since gone away, built up a decent record. He fought on the Contender Series, lost a fight there, but then he fought twice more and I think finished his opponents. But he's a fun fighter. I think he's Kyokushin or Seido, something like that. One of those karate styles that likes axe kicks and all that stuff. Because he used to be in Glory and he'd throw all kinds of weird kicks. And he fights orthodox stance, that is. But he finds ways to get into southpaw, like when he retreats, so he'll throw a combination and then he'll step back into southpaw. And as the opponent steps in, he'll hit him with the left body kick. Something to watch out for. To be honest, you could find that he's like Saki, where he goes, actually, I'm going to fight southpaw for stretches of this fight because it allows me to get to the liver with that kick, which Saki did against, was that Henrique? Whatever his name was. It's interesting watching these guys make adjustments. One of the ones I'm really interested in is Robin van Roosmalen just had his first fight announced with Bellator, and his style is sort of like cover up, return with combinations into low kicks. I'm wondering what he's going to do without the gloves. I know that he's fought MMA before, and he's got a judo black belt and stuff like that, but I'm very interested to see what aspect of his style he gears his MMA performances towards, because Saki didn't do any of the classic Saki stuff in the cage. He fought very differently, but it was working until he got hit by Khalil Roundtree. But it's interesting watching these experienced kickboxers go, I don't need to do that anymore, but I will focus a bit more on this. And you've seen this with Israel Adesanya. He doesn't fight the same way, exactly the same way that he did when he fought in kickboxing. But Chikadze's fighting Brandon Davis, which is a really weird one. I keep looking at this. I've been to several different sites now. I keep looking at it going, have they got the wrong Davis here? Is there someone else supposed to be here? Because he just fought about 5 weeks ago in Shenzhen in it was a 3-round fight and both of them got dinged up a bit. So I'm very surprised. Well, that's the advantage of fighting in Shenzhen, I imagine, and then Copenhagen. No commission, so no medical suspension. But had a good fight with Kyung Ho Kang, was, inches from winning that one, but ended up losing the split decision. He's been around a little while, fought as a beat, but his striking always sort of impresses me. I watch him and I go, yeah, good technical guy, he's doing the right things, but he still somehow loses a lot. So I'm very interested to see how this goes. I think, it's a good test for Chikadze because it's a guy who can strike competently and is good enough that he'll be able to say, okay, well, I'm going to take Chikadze down because he's a terrific kickboxer. But if Chikadze throws even one axe kick, expect that gif to just eat up all your social media for days. What else is going on? Sayar the Great is back. One day I'll learn to say his name, but, he's fighting more and more often, so I might have to now. Hasn't fought since December. He's still not fighting that often. Okay. Hasn't fought since December when Curtis Millender put him through the meat grinder, really boxed him up well in that fight. And then I was like, Curtis Millender's my boy. And then Curtis Millender got stopped by Zaleski, and then by someone else after that. So yeah, Curtis Millender hype train. I was on it, and then it didn't even leave the station. But knocked out Luan Chagas before that, and Rob Wilkinson. Always a tremendous hitter. Has a great front kick to the body that he's added now. Just a fun guy. Alessio De Cicchiro, who is mainly famous for being the guy Jared Cannonier was preparing to fight before he had to jump in and save that fight with Dave Branch and skyrocketed his middleweight career. Alex Oliveira versus Nicholas Dalby, like this. Dalby is coming back from Cage Warriors. He got cut probably a little bit early and went on a 3-fight winning streak in Cage Warriors. Got the interim middleweight title, welterweight title, whatever it is, and then fought Ross Houston to unify the titles. That was the fight that was called off due to too much blood on mat. And I can't say this enough. Go watch that fight because it's incredible. But now he's back in the UFC. They've given him Alex Oliveira in his first fight. Not an easy fight at all. I feel like they could have tried to pick up Houston as well and gone Dalby versus Houston. Do the rematch there. But then I suppose you're taking both of Cage Warriors champions there in that division. So it's a little bit... they'd probably be reluctant to do that if they have a contract with Houston. But Cowboy Oliveira coming off a couple of losses, lost that decision to Mike Perry, lost to Gunnar Nelson. Gunnar Nelson's last really impressive performance, I think, where he left hook into takedown along the fence and then opened up his head with a elbow, and then the rear naked choke, the blood was spurting from his head. That was great. But yeah, actually looking at this, he's not won over too many big names recently. He fought Carlo Perdisoli was his last win, and that was this time last year. And then before that was Carlos Condit. So he's always been a tough guy, but not winning them all back to back at the moment. And of course, Dalby's got to look out because Alex Oliveira is a horrendous cheat. He will foul you any way he can. People don't believe me when I say that. Go watch his fucking fights. But yeah, that'll be good. Cowboy's also got that wicked front kick to the body. Dalby's got this interesting karate style. Does lots of lead leg head kicking and stuff, or certainly did back when he was in the UFC. His boxing got a little bit better since he's been outside. So fun to watch, and looking forward to that. Owen St. Preux is back versus Mikhail Olex. Lower top 20 light heavyweight fight. What do you need to know? But then there's a lower top 20 light heavyweight fight we're looking forward to in the next one, which is Ion Cutelaba versus Khalil Roundtree. Khalil Roundtree coming off the win over Eric Anders. Well, this is the thing. Khalil Roundtree is a bit of... keep saying enigma. I said enigma about Francis Ngannou. Khalil Roundtree is a bit of a mystery because he was very highly touted by Anderson Silva back in the day, and they weren't even using his name. Anderson Silva was just like, I've got this kid coming up in the gym with me. He's a monster, biggest hitter I've ever seen. Gets to the UFC off the Ultimate Fighter, loses to Andrew Sanchez and Tyson Pedro. God, losing Tyson Pedro. You just got to wait long enough and then he'll lose for himself. So he lost to Tyson Pedro, knocked out Daniel Jolly, murdered Paul Craig, and then dull fight against Alexei, whatever his name is, who's fighting Owen St. Preux. Comes in against Gokhan Saki. Saki is people are going, oh, this should be interesting. Yeah, Saki's not going to have to worry about being taken down too much. And then Khalil Roundtree just comes out and sparks him with the first punch. Stepped in on a kick. It was actually really good. It was really slick. Exactly what you would want to see someone doing. It wasn't just Khalil Roundtree hits very hard. It was he knew what Saki was going to do and he timed him. Then he fights Johnny Walker and loses in under a minute because Johnny Walker's got this bizarre magic. But then he has a spiritual rebirth, goes out to Thailand, comes back against Eric Anders, and he's fighting like Sagat. It's fucking incredible. We call him Limpini Reddy, Khalil Roundtree now, because he's using light lead leg and switch kick, stuff you don't see in MMA. And to be honest, you see it in Muay Thai because that's what the Muay Thai game is geared to. You want your lead leg light so that you can pick it up to cross check low kicks, do whatever, teep, knock people off balance. He's not teeping. There's not really much point in him doing the light lead leg, but he's doing it anyway. But he's hitting this switch kick and just murdering Eric Anders. So now he's in against Cutelaba. Cutelaba, all heavyweights and light heavyweights are front runners, but Cutelaba is like the worst kind. If you watch his fight with Glover Teixeira, if you watch his fight with Jared Cannonier, he goes forward, he surprises them with cool kicks and hard punches and stuff like that, and you're going, fucking hell, this Ion Cutelaba, he's pretty good. And then he tires himself out and spends the rest of the fight running from them, and it's really not a good look. They say that fatigue makes cowards of us all, but and I'm not actually calling him a coward, but he very clearly goes, at some point in the fight, he goes, uh-oh, and you can see his expression change when he realizes he's getting tired. And it's really like the whole demeanor about him changes and how he fights. And very good fighters hide when they're hurt or tired. They're just like, okay. And watch a Floyd Mayweather fight or something like that, and you'll realize, hang on, has he just been fainting for the last 30 seconds? Has he actually done anything? That's how you hide when you're scared or you're not scared. When you're tired or you're hurt. Ion Cutelaba just goes, uh-oh, and starts running in the opposite direction. So I'm excited to see that, because, Roundtree is a guy who knocks people out early. Ion Cutelaba is a guy who just blasts people early, but then if they last longer, he struggles. But then I don't remember seeing Khalil Roundtree in too many long fights. So what I'm saying is there's a lot of potential for this to turn to shit in round 2. But I'm super intrigued. Ion Cutelaba is a hard one to like. He just comes across as a bit of a dickhead in his fights and post-fight interviews and things. But I was very impressed with what he did in the first round against Glover Teixeira. Made him look like a stumbling old man, basically. But then ultimately ended up on he didn't even get taken down. He threw some kick while he was tired, and Teixeira just pushed him over, and then went, I better get on top of him. He stepped back to let him up, and then was like, oh wait, no, I haven't been able to get the takedown. Now he's fallen on his back. I should probably jump on him. Light heavyweight division is hilarious. You know what? I'm just going to release a series of videos where I narrate the thought process of light heavyweights in their fights and add Hanna-Barbera sound effects to them falling over or hitting each other. Gunnar Nelson versus Gilbert Burns. As we've already said, love it. I think that the big thing here is, and we talked about this in my very first Filthy Casuals guide to Gunnar Nelson. We had no music. It was just me talking. And then I was like, better find some footage to put over that, me talking. Now I actually edit them and have stuff going on. But basically I was talking about Gunnar Nelson, very good at using the bounce, a little bit like Kyoji, enter on the right hand, or the rear hand lead, so the right hand lead, and then into the clinch, and if they drop their hips back, catch the double collar tie. That's the Gunnar Nelson method, basically, and he'll throw the occasional side kick, but that's about it on the feet. And if the takedowns work, or the double collar tie works, it all works. If the takedowns and the grappling don't work, or the opponent can just get up, the striking very clearly becomes one note. It's kind of like Machida, in that he only does a couple of bursts around on the feet, and if he just kept entering with the right hand lead over and over and over again, you would very quickly go, okay, he's got nothing else, I'm just going to time this, and guys would get comfortable hitting him on the way in, as Rick Story did. By round 4 against Rick Story, he was up on the balls of his feet, he came down by round 4, and Rick Story's just timing him with body shots. And then he dives in on Rick Story with a right hand lead, and Rick Story just takes it and then returns with a left hook and knocks him down because Gunnar Nelson's not out of the way or in the clinch. I think the longer you can keep Gunnar Nelson out in the open, the more you're going to be able to exploit him being a very samey fighter, and not having an awful lot of kickboxing looks. Burns is obviously enormously powerful on the feet, maybe not the best technical striker. He was doing a lot of low kicking in his last fight against, who was that, Kunchenko? Which I would love to see him do against Gunnar Nelson, because Gunnar Nelson relies on that very long stance to begin with. And of course, the thing about Gilbert Burns is that while Gunnar Nelson surprised everyone at ADCC a few years ago, I think he made 4th in the Absolute Division, and the Absolute Division is just murderer's row in ADCC. We're going to be talking about that later, but Burns is actually a world champion at his weight in the gi, and I think he got 3rd place in his division in ADCC, so, probably more accomplished as a pure grappler, but the Absolute Division is a big feather in your cap. there's different kinds of grappling. There are guys who can do better against bigger opponents, and there are guys who can do incredibly in their own weight class. Because it's like any sort of fighting. There are techniques that work on people of your same weight, or where you cut a huge amount of weight to make the weight class, and then there are techniques that work on people who are bigger than you, and they're a much smaller category. But anyway, what I'm saying is it'd be very interesting to see how their grappling matches up. Because as accomplished as Gilbert Burns is, he was also submitted by Gary Tonnen in a no-gi submission-only match a little while ago, despite being bigger and also more accomplished than Tonnen in terms of medals at World Championships and things. Co-main event, Marco. Someone said the other day, they tagged me in a thing and they were like, I used to think it was Jaco Manson, because that's how Jack says it. But Marco Madsen is fighting Danilo Baluardo, who's number 220th in the world light heavyweight. Not important, basically, but Marco Madsen, we're all very hot on. Very accomplished amateur wrestler. Did he go to the Olympics? I can't remember. At any rate, he's 8-0 in MMA, and he's going to be smashing this lad, hopefully, in front of his hometown crowd. Tell you who's missing from this card, and also a Dane, Mads Bennell, mate. I just want to see Mads Bennell hitting his Danish necktie on jobbers on main cards. Give him the number 220th ranked featherweight in the world, and just let him Japanese necktie them. That's what I say. But then that would be every event if I was in charge of the UFC, so maybe it's for the best that I'm not. Anyway, main event, Jaco Hermanson versus Jared Cannonier. I wrote a big article about this at Unibet. I would suggest you check it out. But really for me this is interesting because Cannonier is very untested at middleweight class. Came in at short notice against Branch. Surprised Branch. And Branch really was just sort of running at him. Then beat up Anderson Silva, which is, impressive. I said this at any age, stopping Anderson Silva on the feet with low kicks is impressive. And let's not do the leg injury thing. That always fucked me off so much. When the moment it happened, people were like, oh no, the leg injury again. You're like, it's the other fucking leg. What are you on about? But, legitimately kickboxed Anderson Silva to an early stoppage. But again, we've seen Jack Hermansson fight everyone at middleweight. We've watched him improve incrementally from fight to fight. What we've seen from Jared Cannonier is a very hit and miss fighter. Comes down to middleweight, gets 2 big wins, but they were both under 6 minutes, So we don't really know much about him at middleweight. And both of those guys, Branch just ran at him, and Silva didn't really do anything. However, I've also seen Jack Hermansson sort of galled by people's power. The Thiago Santos fight, he's very aware of how hard Thiago Santos hits, and he just sort of backs up on a straight line, sort of covering up and going, oh no, when Santos steps in. But against Jacare, who's a respectable banger, not as terrifying as Thiago Santos, but still good, Hermansson was confident to do everything. He was jabbing, double jabbing, shoulder rolling, feinting, coming back with counters off Jacare's missed counters of his own. Very confident there. He got hit quite a bit. He was outlanding Jacare 2-1 through most of the fight, but he still got clipped quite a lot. And that's quite worrying when you consider that Cannonier is not just a big banger, he's actually a pretty technical striker. And a lot of the stuff that let Cannonier down is that basically at heavyweight and light heavyweight, if a guy touched his legs, he fell down and couldn't get up. Whereas here he's been able to stop Dave Branch from taking him down. And seems like his heavyweight strength has stayed with him to a degree, coming down to middleweight. But as I was saying in my piece this week, I think the interesting thing about Jack Hermansson is that I've seen plenty of fighters who put on beautiful technical clinics and do all the right things against very dangerous opponents, and then for some reason when they meet another big banger, they'll just go, uh-oh, it's a big banger, and they'll start doing, they'll stop doing those things effectively. It's like Overeem, he battered Mark Hunt perfectly, but then against Ben Rothwell or Francis Ngannou, he's trying to throw punches and sprint in the opposite direction at the same time. I'm not saying that Ngannou is not more scary than Mark Hunt, but both of them can spark you, and both of them are good counterpunchers. Yet against Hunt, Overeem was comfortable feinting and setting things up and then hitting properly and committing to his actual attacks. Whereas against Ngannou, he's running in the opposite direction. Both of them would knock you out if they countered you, but he's doing the right thing against Hunt and getting away with it, and he's just not even attempting the right thing against Ngannou. And that's all mental, that stuff. It's pretty strange, but that's where the mental side of the game comes in. If you can't disciplined enough to make yourself do the stuff that works or should work scientifically against these strikers, it's not going to work. The really obvious ones are when guys come out, and you'll have seen this hundreds of times before, I'm sure. Guys who are capable of feinting and using real attacks in tandem and really confusing people, and then they come out against a big scary banger and they're throwing these feints from miles away that don't look convincing, and then they'll do a big gulp, bite down on their mouthpiece and run in to try and hit them, and you're going, well, that looked nothing like the feint and the feint looked nothing like that, it's not going to work. And I feel like that's the sort of thing that I'm wondering if that happens to Jack Hermansson in this fight. But I think where Jack Hermansson's got the advantage here is that he is when he is disciplined, he's fantastic, but he's also conditioned to do that for 5 rounds. He did it against Jacare just in his last fight. Whereas, we're saying this has been a successful transformation down to middleweight for Cannonier. And we're saying things like, he doesn't seem to be killing himself to get on the scale and this, that, and the other. But he's not gone over 6 minutes. And he's definitely not gone over 6 minutes against guys who are striking and taking him down, or trying to do both. And that's where a lot of Hermansson's takedowns have come. Like, he'll be, even if he's losing on the feet, he'll stay on the feet long enough to get the opponent stepping in, and then he'll hit their hips and turn him over. Back when I was doing the Filthy Casuals Guide, that was basically his early UFC style before he really started learning to strike properly. He had a really weird development because he did really well against southpaws on the feet, like jabbing and sidekicking the lead leg and stuff. And then when he fought orthodox fighters, he looked really weird and didn't really work. And you're going, that's really strange. Well, I suppose it's the division to do it in, because Chris Weidman has fought like 2 orthodox fighters in his last 10 fights. Middleweight, for some reason, is full of southpaws. Or switch hitters like Ramiro. I mean, even Jacare goes southpaw sometimes. But anyway, I think that's the interesting thing. You're going to see Hermansson time his takedown attempts, which is something that Dave Branch didn't do. Dave Branch just sort of ran at him. The other thing is, like, Cannonier is, I said he's 100% more effective on the feet than he is on his back, but he's 100% more effective on the feet when he can kick than when he's not kicking. Against Anderson Silva, he's throwing these kicks and you go, Cannonier's got really good kicks. I remember that from when he fought Sean Jordan at heavyweight. But, it doesn't work if every time you kick Glover Teixeira or Ian Cutelaba or whoever, they just bundle you over. And I was watching Jacare versus Hermansson. First takedown Hermansson hits in like the second round. It's because Jacare throws a low kick. Hermansson just goes, having that, and like bundles him over. Hermansson is pretty good at, and I think this is one of the things that happens when you are good at comfortable striking and comfortable wrestling. You realize that the takedowns are part of the striking. If you time a guy well with a level change into their hips when they're throwing their punches, opening up their hips, throwing their kicks or whatever, you will land the takedown effortlessly, because most of wrestling, like wrestling, the amateur sport, is getting to the hips. It's clearing the arms, it's using the grips, it's hitting the cool setups and stuff. It's tricking people. If they're already throwing a right hand at your head, as long as you've timed it well and you're in position to do it, hitting their hips should be almost guaranteed takedown. Certainly, it's a lot easier to take someone down when they're trying to hit you than it is to take someone down when they're, standing there in their singlet with their arms up, holding your hands and wrists, trying to snap them off every time you put them on them. And I think that's why Hermansson's had this big change. Well, not big change, but he's really come into his own lately. And I think it's the comfort on the feet has made him a better wrestler as a result. I've been playing with that guillotine so much lately. It's a debate whether it's a guillotine, but Danaher calls it a seated katagatame. Katagatame is the arm triangle. And apparently, the first time he used it was in a fight when the commentators were going, and he's just had John Danaher and Gordon Ryan come to his gym to teach a seminar. Wonder if he'll show us any new looks from that. And that's when he started doing this seated katagatame, guillotine, whatever you want to call it, with the arm in. And he's been really, really effective with it since. Even attempted it on Jacare, but Jacare got his hips through to the mat and stuff. And Danaher insists that you can take the back off that, but Hermansson lost it. But didn't lose position, didn't lose out too badly, didn't lose the fight. So, but it's such a cool choke, and you can set it up so well. Because a lot of my personal game from the front headlock is just try and get the go behind, just try and stretch him out and go behind. And that works really well in jiu-jitsu for some reason. I think it's because in wrestling guys are constantly worried about you going behind them, and they'll have the arms out to stop you from going out behind them. But I think in jiu-jitsu people are more scared about the anaconda and the dars. And I'm always like, joke's on you. I have a shit anaconda and dars, and then go behind them. But it's a nice one because if you see Hermansson do it, he'll keep the front headlock grip, move his legs around like he's going behind them, and then come back the other way, squeezing that near knee in behind their elbow and sitting back to what is essentially a guard position. It's very, very cool, and I would love to see him hit it again. I'd love it if he just did that to all the top middleweights ever. That would be great. But again, I'm so compelled by Cannonier's success at middleweight, and what I really liked in the Branch fight was that he was hitting on the breaks, and I think it was the one that knocked him down at the end was a sneaker on the break, because that is such a good time to hit people. If you're a power puncher and you're decent enough in the clinch that you can get the breaks, or you can get the opponent to switch grips freely and give you some space, that's when you can crack them. Because out in the open, guys are petrified of you. Inside, guys are in wrestling mode, regardless of whether they're worried about your punches. If you're fighting for underhooks or whatever, your arms are going down. They're not coming up by your chin. The guy with his arms up by his chin in the clinch is the guy who's being underhooked. So you see lots of guys hit on the sneaker, and it's a really powerful technique. It's powerful in boxing. Jack Dempsey was like, that's the best way to knock people out. Just make sure you do it before the referee says break, because that's the difference between it being illegal and it being legal. If you break on your own terms, you can hit the guy. And that's what Andy Ruiz is really good at. And I said that in my article before the Joshua fight, and then he did it to Joshua. What he does is he'll come inside, and then he'll bring his hands in close to himself and let the opponent hug over his arms, and he'll just wait there for a beat, and then he'll come out swinging, because the opponent will go, okay, that's a break. And if the ref hasn't said it, you're allowed to chin him. But I got a couple of interesting things about both fighters written down here, because I was going to do a Filthy Casuals guide to the matchup, and then, the week progressed, and I was like, can I be asked? But a couple of things I wrote down are, Jack Hermansson, if you watch him fight, he throws a lot of vertical fist punches, as in thumb up towards the ceiling, giving the guy the thumbs up. And there's a few reasons that has been argued for, as, there's a lot of reasons, because in different martial arts, they're like, vertical fist is the more powerful, blah, blah, blah. Like Wing Chun, it's like, keep your elbows in and punch down the center line, and the vertical fist gets down the center easier than the horizontal fist. And there's some truth to that. Like, if you watch someone like Badr Hari, he used to, if the opponent put their guard up, both forearms in front of them, he used to try and split the guard by putting a vertical punch through the center. Because, if your fist is horizontal, you've got a bit more to catch on their forearms, whereas if it's vertical, you can try and smash through the middle. But a couple of the ones, boxing-wise, it's quite rare you see guys teaching this in boxing now, but boxing-wise, one of the reasons was that as you turn your elbow over, again, every time I do this, I'm literally doing it in front of the microphone like you can see it, but as you turn your fist over, your elbow comes out, and that's why some coaches teach you to over-rotate. People were laughing at Ronda Rousey doing it, with pinky up in the air. But guys like Dwayne Ludwig teach you to over-rotate, and Fedor used to go on about over-rotation, because when your pinky goes up and your thumb goes down, your elbow comes up and your shoulder comes up, and that hides your chin, because a lot of guys aren't very good at shrugging their shoulder when they punch. But on the other end of that, a lot of people say that when your elbow comes out to twist the fist, your elbow shoots out and you lose a lot of the forward power out the side in the flick of your elbow. Whereas if you keep a vertical fist, you can keep your elbow down and punch straight like a piston. And another reason is that it hides telegraph, because whether you realize it or not, if you're twisting your fist early, a lot of boxers especially get used to looking for that, even if they don't think they're looking for it. Jersey Joe Walcott used to have his hand by his chin, and then just his right hand by his chin, and then he'd turn basically his thumb across himself. He'd turn his wrist down, and that would be the feint, and the guy would bite on it. It takes almost no effort. But guys like Floyd Mayweather and people like that will throw vertical fist punches from time to time just to give the guy a different look. What are you losing? Even if you're one of those people who says, you get more cutting power or whatever on twisting the wrist, you aren't losing out on anything by throwing a couple of your jabs vertical fist. You're just making it look different, which is, always good. But Hermansson throws a lot of his punches vertical fist. He jabs and throws his right straight vertical fist too. And he gets into weird exchanges like he did with Jacare. And that's one of the things I'm sort of worrying about. He'd throw these weird exchanging punches with Jacare, and then he'd come back behind a shoulder roll, but his right hand would be nowhere, and he'd take a left hook on the chin. Because, your left side is entirely protected, but your right side is just there, pointing towards the opponent's left hook. And that is one of those things that I'm worrying about when I see, Jared Cannonier against Cyril Asker and even Jan Blachowicz, actually. He does a 1-2 and steps through into a shifting left hook, and he does it to both the head and the body. And I think that's the sort of thing, because Hermanson's waiting to shoulder roll your right hand. Just show him it and then step deep with the left hook to the head and see what happens. Anyway, let's talk about some of these other fights going on this weekend, because we're coming up on an hour, and I've only talked about the one card. So, there's one good Bellator card and then one pander to the Irish Bellator card. I know pandering to the Irish. I wrote a book for them, but it's so blatant, and you're like, is this bandwagon still a thing? There's an awful lot of shit on this main Bellator card on the Saturday, but AJ Agazarm's back against Jonathan Quiros. Is he not? Fucking hell. He was in the final of ADCC last year, and now he's fighting on a Bellator undercard instead. Not last year, sorry, 2 years ago. That's a bit weird. Like, ADC is way more prestigious, and everyone just laughed at his last fight anyway because he was standing there with his chin up in the air, taking punch. It was properly weird. Go look it up. But that's really weird that he's there, because you'd think, being a finalist, he'd have got an invitation, or he could have because he's always training his grappling. He's always down various gyms like Henzo's. That's just odd to me. It's even sadder that no one's really brought it up. How must he feel? Like, second place in his division in ADCC last year, and no one's asked him why he's not going this year. What else is going? Oh, fucking... Okay, so AJ McKee's on this card. Awesome. He's a very exciting young fighter. Very much looking forward to him. Great use of the sidekick, actually, for a wrestler. But his dad, Antonio Mckee, who famously said, I thought Chuck was racist when they were asked to hype the fight. He was like, I never saw Chuck with any black people. Going, oh, this isn't looking good, during that train wreck where Oscar De La Hoya kept calling Chuck Liddell. However, AJ McKee is a good fighter. Antonio Mckee was a decent fighter, but has been retired for ages. He's now 50-something years old. And he has the dubious recognition of being the only person to lose via standing strikes to Shinya Aoki. Shinya Aoki punched him once and he tapped out. It was properly strange. But he's fighting some guy on this card. It's like first father and son on a card ever. When they did first mother and son on Ryzen, I was like, that's stupid. I'm not impressed. It's like latest submission in a fight. You're going, well, what you're telling me is that it took you that long to submit him. That's not a record. That's just like it took you long to submit them. Fastest submission, that's a record. Fastest knockout, that's a record. Latest possible knockout in a fight is not a record. That's just, oh, look, there was 1 second left. Okay, great. Anyway, AJ McKee's fighting. Sal Rogers is back. Proper weird one, because Sal Rogers, if you didn't know, now you know, but he beat Ryan Hall in The Ultimate Fighter. It was a 2-round decision, which is always like asterisk bullshit. But in the 2 rounds he fought against Ryan Hall, no one else was able to deal with like the leg entanglement game. Sol Rogers shut him down pretty well, I thought. He was sprawling on him, got pulled into the 50-50 at one point and managed to stack up on Ryan without getting swept over and finished with a heel hook. I thought he looked really good for a guy that I'd never even heard of. And since then, he couldn't compete in the final, I think, because of visa issues. But since then, he went to Tanko, Absolute Championship, things like that. ACB, oh no, sorry, that is Absolute Championship. But then he's had one fight in Bellator when they went to Birmingham, and now he's fighting on this Bellator 228 card as part of their, is it Featherweight Grand Prix? Whatever Grand Prix this is, he's fighting there. So super exciting to see him back. Very talented guy, and I'm sure Ryan Hall would tell you the same. What else is going on? Darian Caldwell is fighting Henry Corrales. There's your legitimate portion of the evening, along with the main event. Gegard Mousasi is fighting Leo Timic. Oh man, I wrote a joke about Mousasi on Reddit this week, and they have not mellowed in their loss to Rafael Lovato. Just so mad. I was like, wouldn't it be hilarious if Gegard Mousasi didn't win against this 50-year-old who can't take a punch anymore? Because let's be honest, Lyoto Machida can't take a punch anymore. People are amazed by the fact that he beat Chael Sonnen, and the thing about Machida is that he's always been really good at stopping a takedown. Like that, it's pretty amazing how good he is at stopping a takedown with no, he's got a sumo wrestling pedigree, but no wrestling pedigree. He's actually, interestingly, him and Anderson were the guys who were pioneering that counter-fighting style where you go around the ring backwards and the guy always has to run to you to take you down. So, by not committing to leading too much, you're not giving them takedown attempts, so they have to come for you, and their takedown attempts tend to be longer and worse. But Lyoto was also great at just digging the underhooks, like old school takedown defense. And if you saw him against Chael Sonnen, Chael pushed him to the fence a couple of times, and Lyoto just had an underhook and was like, nah, mate. I mean, Lyoto, he caught, because the whole thing is like he has this awesome intercepting knee to the body, and that only works if you then dig the underhook as soon as you come down, because the guy's going to try and grab you on the way out. And he did it to Phil Davis. Like, he kneed him in the body, Phil Davis tried to drop on his legs, and Lyoto pulled him up by an underhook. Dude is legitimately very good in the clinch. And still very good in the clinch. If Gegard comes out, takes him down, and finishes him on the ground, fair enough. I mean, he's still like a 50-year-old dude who can't take a punch anymore, but it's pretty impressive to take him down at any point in his career. Really, this is the strangest beef in MMA, because I don't think Machida had anything bad to say about Mousasi, but then he beat him, and Mousasi was like, he's on roids and greasing, he was very, very slippery. And the reason was that, like, Mousasi took him down in, like, the 4th round, and Lyoto just scrambled away and got up. Like, that's a bit of a loose case for greasing there. Oh, he was sweaty and I couldn't hold him down. But then, that's Gegard Mousasi's game. He's a very sore loser, and people are finally realising that now. Enormously talented guy, but such a bad loser. And then he fought Lovato, and afterwards was like, drugs, drugs, drugs. And you're like, before the fight, you were saying, well, when you signed with Bellator, you were saying you were promised extra testing on a case-by-case basis by Scott Coker. At least put Scott Coker on blast. Don't be like, oh, drugs. You went to Bellator. You knew that it was about drugs. There's a reason Lyoto Machida, is in Bellator right now. It's because the UFC said, he's getting knocked out a lot here. Let's send him to, let's let him go off and make a living in Bellator where he can roid up and fight whoever. I mean, look at the shape Machida's in. I don't want to, do too many allegations, but he's looking pretty fucking incredible. Really, this should be, should obviously be a Gegard Mousasi win, but there are some interesting things about it. Like, Gegard's whole thing is being great at jabbing. And that's kind of hard to do against Lyoto Machida because he's got such a long stance, his head's so far back in his stance, he's normally a southpaw, so his lead hand's right out there covering your jab, and he's very good at circling the ring, This isn't for a title, is it? No, because Lovato's got the title, so it's 3 5-minute rounds. So actually that's quite interesting, because I would have expected, like, unless Mousasi chins him very early on, and we go, fuck, Lyoto really is completely spent, I would expect Gegard Mousasi to get stronger as the fight goes on, and Lyoto to slow down a bit. As this is only 3 5-minute rounds, I mean, that, to be honest, that gives Machida more of a chance, I'd say. With that all being said, if Mousasi doesn't win, that's a pretty bad look. I don't know, to be honest, I'd be fine watching Mousasi fight Lovato again. I thought the first fight was good fun. And I'd also be happy watching Machida fight Lovato because, at least he's not going to get knocked out too badly, and he stops a good takedown. Plus, that every time Lovato steps in, he's going to try and knee him in the gut, which is a little bit better than, like, okay, I've been taken down for 3 rounds, I'm going to try and jab him. There's a little bit lower stakes there on eating a jab. But anyway, needless to say, Gegard Mousasi is a very good fighter. He's just not the best middleweight in the world. And really, I don't even care, like, he's not the best middleweight in the world. I just love winding up his fans because they are so angry about the fact that he's not... I mean, they used to just be obnoxious, but now that he's lost, they're, like, really angry about it. Regardless, if he loses, expect excuses about lack of motivation, plus Machida's steroids, plus greasing, plus questionable judge's decision. / ref's decision if it's a knockout. If he wins, business as usual. And then your main event, Patricio Pitbull versus Juan Archuleta. I wrote a big Juan Archuleta piece for the Patreon boys. Quite enjoyed studying him, to be honest. Basically we were talking about the difference between flying knees, as we normally see them, which is like run up and throw yourself towards the opponent, and jumping knees or hopping knees, which is what Archuleta does. And he does them out of the clinch too. It's very sort of like Kyokushin style thing where you're in close and then you jump straight up and bring the knee up straight under the chin as much as you can. And he does it all the time. Really interesting striking, like kind of elements of TJ Dillashaw there. Trains at the training lab with him and Cub Swanson and Dwayne Ludwig. But uses his wrestling a lot more than TJ does offensively. And I think that is what saves him from being like a poor TJ Dillashaw impersonation. Because if you watch like his knockouts, it's all just changing direction, the opponent walks in, he hits him with an overhand. It's never like really clever stuff. It's just kind of like Josh Emmett. The movement hides the very basic combination. Barely even a combination, it's 2 punches. The movement hides that. You bring the opponent forward with the movement. Where he does get hurt is when he sort of like runs in long flurries, and Ricky Bandejas, who I thought could have even won that fight, to be honest, did very well doing the Rory McDonald, walking him towards the fence, letting him come off the fence, and then cracking him with counters as he backed towards the middle of the cage. Pitbull obviously riding high off that win over Michael Chandler. We're all riding high off Pitbull's win over Michael Chandler. I think very interesting fight because Pitbull is hard enough to take down. I mean, he's always been sort of small for featherweight, to be honest. But he's been working with Eric Albertine, the coach of Henry Cejudo, and a guy who was down in Brazil teaching there for years and years before that at Team Nogueira. But they also share a karate coach. What's his name? Mano Santana, I think. So that's the similarity in style between Pitbull and Cejudo explained. What Pitbull does really well is like time guys coming in with the timed Chandler with the cross counter, right hand across the top of the left. Did it twice, knocked him out on the second one. Inside a minute. Oh, I think it was a minute and 1 second, I think it took him. But really what he got famous for and what he was really good at before he was good at the karate stuff is that he has a wicked left hook. And guys would just, like, if he gets into a trade, left hook on the chin, they're dead. And I think that's the one that's probably going to trouble Archuleta, because Archuleta has a real problem with when he's not just doing jab overhand. He's trying to think mid-combination what his next move will be. He's like, 1, 2, 3, what am I doing next? 4, 5, and like he gets clipped a lot with his chin in the air while he's doing it. And I was watching that going, if Patricio Pitbull chins you with a left hook while you're doing that, it's probably, at least you're going to lose the round. It's not going to go well. So I think that's a decent enough card. There's like 3 or 4 fights there I care about. And then you've got Bellator, is it Dublin? Yeah, Dublin, pander to the Irish. Fun enough main event. You got Benson Henderson, my boy, versus Miles Jury. Miles Jury, he disappeared quite fast from the UFC, didn't he? That was weird. James Gallagher in the co-main event against Roman Salazar, who I think is a last-minute replacement. Yeah, there was a guy called Cal Eleanor who was going to fight him. And Cal Eleanor was 8-2. Oh, Cal Pacino, there you go. He was 8-2, but he's pulled out, and this lad stepped in. So can't really complain about the level of competition for James Gallagher there. Can complain about the matchmaking for Michael Venom Page on this card, because they got him against a guy with 4 MMA fights, and everyone's like, well, he's got a good kickboxing record, and I'm like, that's great, but Michael Page has been training full-time as an MMA fighter for the last 10 years or whatever. This is a bullshit matchup. It's an SBG. It's weird, because they got an SBGI guy in to lose to Michael Page. Properly strange, but I think everyone's picked up on this now. It's bullshit, and the really annoying thing is that Michael Page did well against Paul Daly. It's a boring fight, but he made Paul Daly try and take him down, which is fairly impressive. Michael Page did decently against Lima. If you watch the first round of that fight, he bursts in on Lima, tries to throw in like a little trip, and ends up on his back instead. And then Lima's on top of him, and you're like, fucking hell, this is bad. And Michael Page holds wrist control and doesn't get hit the entire round, basically, which was impressive. And then in the second round, Lima times him stepping in with a beautiful low kick, takes his legs out. You're like, nice. And then Page is bouncing up in a really weird way. Lima throws this wide uppercut, like straight arm Marge Simpson uppercut, comes in like from underneath, but Page's head is sideways and he's on his knees, and it turns his chin round. It's right on the end of his reach. And I pissed off so many people the other week by just being like, that's a pretty crazy stroke of pretty crazy chance that happened, and what I meant was, like, if you reran that if he kicked him in the leg every time he stepped in, which I imagine he would have planned to do from that point on, how many times do you think he'd have caught him with that uppercut coming up? I mean, that is a crazy turn of events. If I were Michael Page, I would beat myself up about getting kicked in the leg, getting timed with that. I'd go, fuck, he caught me there. But I'm not going to, wouldn't beat myself up about getting knocked out with that weird uppercut on the way up. There was like, what's the correct defense for that in the moment? But yeah, my point is, like, he did well. Like, no, if anyone watching that, I mean, I've been very anti-Michael Page hype in the past, but anyone watching that who isn't very anti-Michael Page hype is going to be like, okay, fair enough, he did all right, got knocked out. It happens. And he seemed cool about it too. Afterwards, he just got up and went, it was quite cool. They showed Lima go over to him as he's sort of like asking what happened, and then he just sort of goes, "Oh," and like gives him a punch in the chest, like, "Oh, you bastard." But he was very cool about it, and you're like, okay, cool, that's great. Let's see Michael Page against some more top. Well, Lawrence Larkin isn't like a top welterweight at the moment because he had a couple of losses, Paul Daly and Douglas Lima, but then he beat Fernando Gonzalez, and then they put him against some guy who I've never heard of, and he won that fight. So put Page in against Lawrence Larkin. I mean, Lawrence Larkin probably not knocking you out. Like, that's not really his MO. He might make you look awkward or bad, but at least you get a really good fight out of it, or at least an interesting fight, a good name on the record. This fight makes 0 sense, and that's what's really hacking me off. Like, this is just they're hoping that he sparks Keeley. And the really annoying thing is that I've seen everyone this week being like, what a bollocks fight, that's so stupid. And I know that if he scores a highlight reel knockout, it'll be front page of Reddit, everyone will be like, oh my god, get a load of this guy. It's just really irritating. And it's just fucking Scott Coker 101. Scott Coker did a Twitter AMA this week, and in my procrastinating and trolling on every social media avenue, I asked him, are you ever going to apologise for almost killing Dada 5000? And was that an appropriate lead-in for two men in the main event with a combined age of almost 100? And it got the most likes, but he didn't answer me. But interestingly, I think there's going to be something coming out about that soon, because I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but they approached me, but a documentary company who made a very successful documentary on a very successful streaming service. There's only one, but a successful documentary producer was hitting me up being like, we're going to be talking about Scott Coker, and we're going to be talking about Kimbo Dada, and I've seen your criticism of Scott Coker, would you like to talk about it? But it's interesting that people are hitting up on that now, on just what a trashy way Scott Coker put together his business. Anyway, I was about to cut off there, but I have not done anything this week, so we're going to go longer, and someone asked me a question. Dear Jack, any chance sharing your thoughts both pre and post ADCC on the podcast, please? Be interested to hear your analysis on any trends you think might appear beforehand and ones you picked up on during, and perhaps anything that might be relevant to MMA if applied. Even a few minutes would be great. I tried listening to Flow Grappling's podcast a couple of days ago, but those fuckers melted my eardrums. Your buttery English tones are preferable. Cheers, as always, for the content. Flow Grappling, you can pay me to do stuff for you if you want, but actually, no, then you're behind a massive paywall. And then also, they won't let me use any of this stuff in my Filthy Casuals guide. Shout out to BJJ Fanatics, because they said, like, we'll never take down anything you do of ours. But Flow Grappling, obviously just tyrants of the internet regarding copyright. But they do own ADCC rights, and so that the whole thing this month has been like, how do I sign up for just a month? And they're like, oh, we're taking that option away. Anyway, so ADCC, let's have a look at the brackets. Right, as always, like, there's a lot of people on these cards that I don't know, and I think that's one of the wonderful things about BJJ, particularly because there's so many killers in, like, South America that they'll just turn up on these cards, and you go, oh, wow, okay. Davi Ramos just came out of nowhere, won ADCC in 2015, but, there's always interesting people to watch, and, the great thing about ADCC is that also there are, they have qualifiers, and then they also save places for invitations, so that you can have interesting people turn up, or people who, like Gary Tonnen, is now at sort of a different stage in his career, but people do still love seeing him at ADCC, and no one's going to argue that he isn't a very, very good grappler, so they've invited him, even though he's been focusing on his MMA career. Now, if you don't know, the ADCC, well, I'll just give you a quick primer on what it is. Basically, it's the World Cup of no-gi grappling, and it only happens once every 2 years. It's normally incredible. Like, there, on any ADCC, there are a number of amazing submissions. There's a number of people break through as, like, amazing performers. And in some ways, it shows you some trends that may make their way to MMA in the future. The last ADCC was particularly special, and I think this is something I was talking about this week too, regarding Combat Jiu-Jitsu, which is what Eddie Bravo is doing now instead of the Eddie Bravo Invitational. The Eddie Bravo Invitational was a submission-only tournament for no-gi grapplers. The Combat Jiu-Jitsu Worlds is Combat Jiu-Jitsu, which is basically no-gi but with slapping on the ground, and it's shit. And also, most of the top grapplers in the world don't want to do it. They're like, I'd rather just do MMA and get paid properly, because the whole thing about ABI was that he only paid the winner, basically. But EBI served. It's going to be remembered, I think, as like a little capsule in time, kind of like Metamoris, but in EBI you saw the Danaher guys come up with the leg lock system and the back control system, and to an extent Gordon Ryan's passing system. And you saw them go through those tournaments, particularly Gordon Ryan as an unknown, and then he turned up at ADCC, and the behavior of the BJJ community was like, can't wait to see him get exposed. You know, like that stuff won't cut it against the best in the world. And he ran through ADCC in 2 divisions. You know, the only person who beat him was Felipe Pena, and that was in the absolute division. And he did it largely with his guard passing, the floating passing stuff, which is, you know, hadn't been hugely used in BJJ up to that point. And the leg lock stuff, which is Danaher's, well, whenever you say own creation, they'll be like, actually, I think you'll find there's some judo footage of someone doing an inside ashi, blah, 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 blah. But, you know, that was something that Danaher was working on for a long time. You were always hearing, oh, John Danaher's got this leg lock system, and you'd be like, yeah, leg lock system. I'm doing the jerk off motion and rolling my eyes. But, you know, that's how leg locks were treated a lot of the time in BJJ. It was like, there's the positional game, and then there's leg lock bullshit. You know, like, that was it. And, you know, there were guys like Ryan Hall doing well with positional jiu-jitsu and leg locks, but a lot of it was treated as gimmicky bullshit. And the Danaher guys really proved that it isn't. You know, I mean, Ryan Hall had been saying, like, the inside heel hook is the most dangerous hold in jiu-jitsu. Everyone should be using it in competition because at the highest level, guys aren't going to tap unless you threaten to ruin their life, basically, or at least for a couple of months. So yeah, in terms of that, like, ADCC has a lot of surprise. The other surprise last time was that Craig Jones, he'd done well on EBI. He'd never won an EBI, but he'd done well on EBI, which is like an invitational thing. So people were like, it's not the world's, they're not great. And then Craig Jones turns up and strangles Leandro Lo, actual world champion several times in the gi, and Murillo Santana, actual world champion several times in the gi, and no gi, I believe, because the no gi worlds are kind of like wanky. The IBJJF no-gi worlds, I think, is the one where they don't allow heel hooks. So you're kind of like, come on, we're not wearing the gi, let us heel hook. Whereas ADCC, heel hooks, neck cranks, all of it legal. In fact, a couple of ADCCs ago, they even allowed the slam for a while. And Gio Martinez slammed his way out of a Jeff Glover triangle. Now, the downside of ADCC, if you see this as a downside, is that it's the lowest division is under 66 kilos. So guys like Kai Otera, Bruno Frazzato, the small guys who are really wizards in jiu-jitsu, who you would love to see, like Kai Otera, competing at this level, or at this event rather, you don't tend to... Well, fucking hell. Okay, just notice Bruno Frazzato's invited this time. But again, he's a very small man. You know, he's in a division with Gianni Grippo and Gio Martinez, and they are bigger than him. I'm telling you that. But the under 66 kilos division is the bottom of the weight classes, so you don't see guys like Kai Otera too much. The other downside of the ADCC system is that it only happens every 2 years, and then they have a super fight championship. And the super fight championship, they were trying to make it out this week to be like the most prestigious thing in ADCC, but I don't think anyone gives a fuck about it, do they? Like, this time it's Andre Galvao versus Felipe Pena, because Felipe Pena won the last Absolute tournament, or the bracket at the last Absolute. Andre Galvao, I think, won 2 times ago, but defended in the super fight. Basically, the winner of the Absolute is invited to fight the super fight champion in a super fight in 2 years' time. So basically what we get is, rather than getting to see Felipe Pena go through that division of killers he was in, and maybe rematch Gordon Ryan, we get to see him against Andre Galvao, who I believe is effectively retired. So, like, that's kind of pointless. That's the other downside. With all of that said, most of it's fucking awesome. So let's get into the good stuff. The under 66 kilo division, I'm just going to go through some of the names who matter here, or at least that I know, because I'm not ultra hardcore, I'm just a little bit hardcore. Gio Martinez, obviously, probably 10th Planet's most successful guy. Student of Eddie Bravo, former breakdancer, and just generally a very fun grappler. Him and his brother are both very good at Peruvian necktie stuff like that. Has a really interesting Kimura and guillotine like setup game. He'll sit up, threaten the Kimura, go on the guillotine, go for the guillotine, threaten the Kimura. It's fun. Like, he did it against basically whenever they did the EBI, John Danaher's crew would build their highlight reel against Eddie Bravo's boys, and Gio Martinez would do actually pretty well. So he's pretty legit. Augusto Mendes, Tanquinho, was married to Mackenzie Dern for a while, or was at least dating her for a long time. Very good. I mean, he was in the UFC. I think he failed a drug test, didn't he? But got knocked out by Cody Garbrandt, I remember that much. But very good grappler. Went to EBI, went against Eddie Cummings, stuffed all of Eddie Cummings' leg lock work I think it went to the time limit, and everyone was like, well, those leg locks clearly won't work. And that was before they won the ADCC. What else? Gianni Grippo, great guy from Marcelo Garcia's academy. You rolled with him back in the day before I knew who he was. And I was like, oh my god, I rolled with Gianni Grippo. Amazing, like Berimbolos and Kiss of the Dragon, stuff like that. Really more of a gi player than a no-gi player. Bruno Frasato, tiny dude, but I would love to see how he does in this tournament. And Nicky Ryan, obviously the wunderkind from John Danaher's school. Really, the thing with Nicky Ryan has always been like John Danaher picks his matchups very carefully in terms of these like super fights they do. And then last year, I think was it last year? Whenever he dropped out of ADCC, basically the whole thing was like, I reckon John Danaher wants to keep his reputation like as a wunderkind intact. But very good, very good playing seated guard. Gets 2-on-1s, goes under the legs, does all the Danaher leg stuff, does good triangles off 2-on-1, like from seated guard. Just a pretty bloody solid grappler. Be very interested to see how he does when he starts picking up some wrestling and going more aggressive, like top play stuff like Gordon Ryan. But even then, like all those... Oh, and Paulo Miao's there, sorry, I forgot to even mention him. We only got one Miao. They only invited one Miao. What the fuck? But Paulo Miao was invited. That's great. You know, Mr. Upside Down. But maybe someone will leg lock Paulo Miao and he'll refuse to tap because that's what normally happens. Anyway, the interesting thing is that of those 16 dudes, 12 were invited, you know, as top BJJ guys or no-gi grapplers or whatever, and then 4 qualified. So you got Nicky Ryan qualified by winning the North American trials. Ruan Alvarenga qualified by the South American trials. Thomas Halpin, who's from Ireland apparently, qualified through the European trials. And then Kenta Iwamoto qualified through the Asian and Oceania trials. So yeah, it's pretty cool that these guys who you've never heard of are now going to go with some of these awesome guys who you have. I realise that was quite a long-winded way of getting that done, but we'll talk through some of the other divisions now. Under 77 kilos is one of my favourites to watch. You've got Gary Tonin in there. You've got Wagner Rocha, who's just won the fucking Combat Jiu-Jitsu World, which is just cool. No one cares. Edwin Namshmi, who's very good with his triangles and his darces and things like that. Hanato Kanuto, Mr. Armbars. Oliver Taza, who squeezed his eye juice into Keenan Cornelius' eye to take him out of the running. Lachlan Giles, just qualified through the... he didn't even get invited. Fucking hell. That's pretty rough. Lachlan Giles qualified through the Asia and Oceania trials. And if you remember that Kinectic thing they did the other day, he ran the table on one of the teams. They had the team full of like old MMA fighters, and Lachlan Giles just ran through him. It was pretty impressive, even though Lachlan Giles is a professional grappler who's qualified for ADCC a couple of times, and those guys were all sort of like washed up MMA fighters. But, I mean, he's very good, and he puts out a lot of great instructional stuff. Plays a lot of single leg X, plays a lot of deep half and things like that. It's weird, because him and Craig Jones come from the same gym, both play the half guard, but both play very different kinds of half guard. Lachlan Giles plays like a high knee shield, going for underhooks and stuff. Very good at like Jedi mind trick back take stuff. But Craig Jones is all about going for the other leg and trying to get through on the leg attacks. Taz is good fun, forgot to say that. Does some really cool like... he'll go for like knee cuts and then he'll pummel his other leg in and backstep on leg lock attempts. He's I think he's at TriStar, but he trains a lot with Henzo's boys. Or John Danaher's boys, rather. DJ Jackson, always controversial, for reasons you can Google. John Satava, who's like the new Marcelo Garcia. Basically, Marcelo Garcia's student who takes after him the most. All about arm drags and single leg X. And JT Torres, who was last year's winner. Oh, and Lucas Lepre, fucking hell. I forgot to even mention Lucas Lepre, who still hasn't won an ADCC, which I thought is amazing, because like, I've seen him win everything else. He got to the finals against Davy Ramos, and Davy Ramos hit that, how the fuck was anyone supposed to know that was happening, armbar over his guard. 88 kilos, or under 88 kilos, you've got Adam Wodzinski, who's basically reinvented the butterfly guard for the modern generation. BJJ Scout, massive Wodzinski fan, did a few studies on him. Probably better in the gi than he is no-gi, because he does a lot of belt gripping. Alec Balding, who's an awesome guy, always on the BJJ subreddit. Really fun grappler, actually. And wears great shorts, which I always appreciate. Josh Hinger, famous for his guillotine. Famous for being absolutely yoked at age 40, but also a really cool guy. Does a great podcast with Keenan Cornelius. And he's often, I think he wins the Masters quite a lot. You know, he's one of these older guys, but is still hanging with these younger guys. Craig Jones was invited, obviously, because he's Craig Jones. Fuck Craig Jones. If you don't know Craig Jones, what are you even doing here? I talk about him every week. But Craig Jones, leg lock master. Been training more with Danaher's squad lately. So you've had Keenan, Craig Jones, and Gordon Ryan all on that mat. That sounds awesome, because that was like the under 88 kilo division, basically, last year, those three guys. I'm so sad Keenan's not in this year, because Keenan, like, a lot of his no-gi stuff is very interesting. And he tends to, in the opening, because ADCC, I think they're 10-minute matches, and then the last 5 minutes is points. So that's supposed to encourage people to just go for whatever in the first 5 minutes and not worry about the points, which is that's good. But also it leads to things like when Craig Jones fought Zanjay Ribeiro last time. Basically, Zanjay did nothing, and then in the last 2 minutes or whatever, tried to get an advantage or half a point or whatever. It can sort of backfire, but what Keenan likes to do is guys will pull guard in the first 5 minutes because they're like, well, if I'm going to get it off, I'll get it off now, and then I'll wrestle for the second half. And he likes to hit lots of toreandos, things like that, and make them recover their guard, and he tries to tire them out a bit first. Did it to Craig Jones last time, and it worked really well. Keenan's also actually, like, given that he's remembered as like the gi guy, he hits a lot of under passes, like double under passes, and you don't see those done a lot in any sort of jiu-jitsu nowadays, compared to the other sort of passes. Rustam Chiziev, can never say his name, monster. Like, wears a sweater made from his own hair. Just like, I think he goes shirtless to a lot of these ones, but really beastly wrestler and sambo guy. I'm surprised he's under 80. Sorry, 88 rather. I'm surprised he's under 90 is what I'm saying. Murillo Santana, long-time vet world champion. Matthias Denise, another one of Marcelo's boys. Yeah, fun division. Shame about Keenan not making it, and, Keenan moved up and so did Gordon, I believe. Also no Zanjay. Under 99, you got Gordon Ryan, the king, moved up from under 88. Vinny Magalhaes, who's a legend but looking ridiculous for 36, whatever he is. Jackson Souza, who gets leg locked quite a lot. Tex Johnson, a very controversial figure, tends to hold submissions too long, especially heel hooks. And there's an amazing shot went up on Reddit of him staring down Craig Jones by the side of the mat before their match. And Craig Jones popped in and was like, yeah, this is when he was telling me that he wasn't going to let go of the submission if I tapped. And then Craig Jones just beat him, because that's what Craig Jones does. And Craig Jones beat him in like 13 seconds at one of the EBIs. But, I mean, Tex Johnson's hit and miss, but he's very, very dangerous. Like Felipe Pena found that out. Felipe Pena's in the super fight of this ADCC, but most recently he went to Kasai, had a match with Tex Johnson in a tournament, and Tex Johnson got to 50-50 and just tore his heel off. It was pretty brutal. And Tex Johnson's coach was just looking at it like, oh, you're such a dickhead. Why am I your coach? And then he went into rehab and got accused of rape and various other stuff. But it's a turbulent life for Tex Johnson. And James Puopolo is replacing Keenan. Yeah, that division is not as fun as the lower divisions. And then over 99, the heavyweight boys. Who have you got? Yuri Samosh. Wow, is he over 99? Bloody hell. Oh, he's moving up this year. Muhammad Ali, who is a brick shithouse. Hudson Taylor, a wrestler. Orlando Sanchez is probably going to win this one. He just sort of shoves people. That's his thing, just shoves people. Really fat lad, but does really quick backstep passes from time to time. Like, you watch his matches going, well, I know he's capable of some very cool shit for a big fat lad, but most of the time he's just pushing people. And Nick Rodriguez, who is Gordon Ryan's training partner and gym buddy. And if you think Gordon Ryan's weight transformation is ridiculous, check out Nick Rodriguez's. Oh, and Buchecha's there. Oh, brilliant. Well, Luke Thomas will be happy about that one at least. And Roberto Cyborg was there. I mean, we're complaining about roids, but like, Gordon Ryan was competing against guys like Cyborg and Felipe Pena. I mean, Pena has been suspended for drugs in a sport that doesn't test for drugs. So, like, being mad about Gordon Ryan and Nicky Rodriguez's enormous weight gain is ridiculous when you consider the people they're competing against. Anyway, I reckon that'll do us. We'll talk more about it after ADCC when I've seen all the matches, because it'll be interesting to see really how everyone deals with the leg lock game from last time round. And wrestling is still like the be all and end all at ADCC. AJ Agazam got to the final against was it Cabrina last year? Oh, wait, is Cabrina even in? I don't think he's in. interesting. But Cobrinha had a match with AJ Agazarm in the finals and basically just held off and kept it standing and then hit a single leg and won. Wrestling is basically the game at ADCC. Anyway, I reckon that'll do us for this week. Sort of ended up rambling about brackets at the end there. But some good fights on this weekend. Looking forward to seeing them. And we'll be back here Monday to chat all about that. Recently, I've been working on more... I'm doing some Patreon stuff for the Patreon boys, but I've also been researching something big I'm doing for the Patreon boys. Lots of history stuff on the Congo. So you can get excited for that, because I'm going to tie in the history element of the history episodes and the fighty element of the history episodes, and they're going to cross over and it's going to explode all over your face. But that's a little way down the road, but I'll tell you when that's a little bit closer to completion. But it basically could end up being like an audio book of its own. Anyway, if you want to join the Patreon, help me do this podcast and get access to all the stuff like the Juan Archuleta study we did this week, go ahead and do that. If you want to send a question to the podcast, fightsgonebypodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I've written at any point, including that Juan Archuleta study, just started raining, and the Hermansson Cannonier piece at Unibet, head to fightprimer.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack. Cheers! Musasi's not